What if, on an ordinary winter morning, while doing nothing more than household chores, you heard someone softly whisper your name from behind you when you were completely alone? In the early 1980s, in the small town of West Pittston, Pennsylvania, a quiet duplex on Chase Street became the center of one of the most disturbing paranormal cases in American history. The woman at the heart of it all was Janet Smurl, a 37-year-old housewife, mother of 4, and by all accounts, a deeply grounded and practical person. On a cold winter DeSource's place in early 1983, Janet was alone in her basement, loading the washing machine with her family's laundry. Her husband Jack was at work, and her children were at school. The only sound filling the house was the low hum of a television upstairs, a cheerful game show audience laughing, completely unaware of what was about to happen below. As Janet poured detergent into the machine, she suddenly felt the strange sensation that someone had spoken. She paused. The washing machine began to spin faster. She shook her head, dismissing the thought as imagination. But just as she turned to leave, she heard it again, clearer this time. A woman's voice, soft, calm, whispering her name. Janet. Her body froze. The basement was empty. Only cardboard boxes, Christmas decorations, and a small window letting in pale winter light. Then the voice came again, this time from behind her. Colder, mocking, almost playful. Her blood ran cold as she backed toward the stairs. The voice repeated her name several times, each whisper sounding more deliberate, more amused. Janet would later say she heard a faint giggle, as if whatever was speaking was enjoying her fear. Summoning all her courage, she shouted, "What do you want?" Silence followed, only the washer thudding, the television laughter upstairs. But just as relief crept in, the voice called her name one final time. Janet ran. She slammed the basement door shut, unaware that this moment marked the end of normal life for the Smurl family and the beginning of something far darker that had been waiting inside that house for years. Long before Janet ever heard her name whispered in the basement, the Smurl family had already endured more upheaval than most. Janet and her husband Jack Smurl began their married life in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, sharing a home with Jack's parents, John and Mary Smurl. The early years were happy. Jack held a steady job, Janet became a full-time mother, and their first 2 daughters, Dawn and Kim, were born into what seemed like a stable, loving household. That stability was shattered in June of 1972, when Hurricane Agnes tore through northeastern Pennsylvania. The Susquehanna River overflowed, and floodwaters swallowed the Smurls' home, rising nearly 12 feet in a matter of hours. The family escaped unharmed, but the house was destroyed beyond repair. Eventually, the local redevelopment authority condemned the property, forcing the family to start over. With nowhere else to go, John and Mary proposed a solution. They found an aging duplex for sale on Chase Street in West Pittston, a former mining town scarred by decades of underground collapses and abandoned shafts now filled with water. The plan was simple. The parents would purchase the entire duplex, and Jack and Janet would buy the other half at a reduced price. It was affordable, close-knit, and seemed like a blessing after disaster. What the Smurls didn't know, or chose to dismiss, were the rumors surrounding the property. Neighbors whispered that police had been called to the address many times over the years. Some claimed strange noises could be heard even when the building sat empty. Others spoke of former residents who practiced occult rituals, or faces seen peering through the curtains late at night. In West Pittston, the house was quietly known as one of those places. Like most families, the Smurls ignored the gossip. Old towns always had old stories, and at first, life on Chase Street felt normal. Jack and Janet became active members of the community, well-liked and respected. No one warned them. No one asked questions. The first strange events appeared so minor they were almost laughable. In the mid-1970s, Mary Smurl bought a brand new rug for her living room. When she had unrolled it, a large greasy stain sat in the center, wet, fresh, impossible to explain. She'd cleaned it thoroughly. 2 days later, it returned in the exact same spot. Then came the plumbing issues. Pipes newly repaired by John, an experienced welder, would inexplicably burst again. Tools vanished and reappeared in impossible places. Renovations took far longer than they should have, as if something unseen was deliberately interfering. At the time, no one thought of demons. They blamed the house, old wiring, weak foundations, bad luck. but the house was only just beginning to show its true nature. By 1976, the disturbances escalated from harmless oddities to frightening intrusions. Janet Smurl began to notice objects moving on their own. Cliffs slid off counters, knives appeared on the floor, and doors slammed with no wind or human hand. At night, she often woke to strange tapping on walls or ceilings, always synchronized with soft whispers she could never quite catch. Her heart raced, yet when she tried to alert Jack, he would insist it was just the house settling, or perhaps the girl's dreaming. Then came the cold spots. Winter nights brought freezing drafts that no amount of insulation could block. Janet described standing in her own hallway, the air around her hands and face icy, while the rest of the house remained normal. The girls, Don and Kim, complained about seeing shadows that weren't ours and feeling a presence in their rooms. At first, Janet thought it was imagination. Children often dream vividly. But the shadows didn't vanish when the lights were turned on. They lingered, watching. In 1978, Jack noticed scratches on his arm, 3 deep parallel marks upon waking in the middle of the night. There were no pets capable of causing them, and the marks appeared again and again over the following weeks. Soon, the family discovered that the furniture in their home seemed to bear claw-like gouges overnight, yet no animal had entered the house. At this point, panic was creeping in. Something unnatural was happening, something violent. By 1983, the Smurls were living in fear. Mary Smurl, Jack's mother, reported seeing shadowy figures in the kitchen at dawn. On one particularly chilling morning, she heard a male voice calling her name softly from the basement, though no one was home. Jack, desperate to understand, began documenting every event, keeping a meticulous journal of times, dates, and occurrences. The family's sleep became fragmented. Some nights they huddled together, trying to comfort one another, while doors banged shut and objects flew across rooms. Neighbors noticed the change in the family as well. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing Janet walking outside during early mornings, her hair disheveled, eyes wide with terror. Some believed she was suffering from stress. Others whispered about the Smurl house and moved their children away, unwilling to risk exposure to whatever haunted it. A sense of isolation settled over the family, where Pittston's friendly community became distant. Curiosity mingled with fear, and no one wanted to intervene. It was in these years that the family began considering the possibility that they were dealing with a supernatural entity, something far beyond natural explanation. They called priests to bless the home, but while prayers sometimes temporarily reduced the intensity of occurrences, nothing ever stopped them. Doors continued to slam, footsteps echoed in empty rooms, and cold spots spread through the house like creeping shadows. The summer of 1983 marked the beginning of a relentless escalation in the Smurl household on Chase Street, West Pittston, Pennsylvania. What had started as minor disturbances, mysterious stains, cold drafts, and inexplicable sounds had evolved into something that could no longer be ignored. Janet Smurl, now fully aware that something sinister was dwelling within their home, found herself living in a constant state of vigilance. Each day brought a new terror. It began with the faint, lingering smell of decay that no source could explain. The odor would creep through the hallways, thickening in the bedrooms, and seemed to pulse with an almost malevolent intent. Sometimes it would appear when they were alone. Other times, the entire family would smell it simultaneously. Attempts to locate or eliminate the source were fruitless, leaving everyone frustrated and unnerved. Strange scratches and bite marks began appearing overnight on Jack, Janet, and even the children. These marks were not self-inflicted. They bore no signs of conventional wounds or accidents. Even Simon, their loyal German shepherd, seemed aware of an unseen predator. He would growl at empty corners, bark at shadows, and sometimes be lifted from the ground by an invisible force. The physical manifestations of this haunting were growing bolder. Televisions that had long been left unplugged would flicker too, life on their own, displaying static images that seemed to mimic or mock the family. Doors would slam violently, often in empty rooms. Footsteps echoed across hallways when no one was present, and at times, the entire house would vibrate as if some colossal force was shifting within the walls. By late 1984, the Smurls' lives were a continuous nightmare. Even the younger children, who had once thought the occurrences were merely funny noises, became traumatized. Dawn, the eldest daughter, reported seeing shadowy figures in her room at night, hovering near her bed, whispering incomprehensible words. She would scream and run to her parents, only for them to find the room empty upon inspection. The family began documenting each event meticulously, writing down dates, times, and descriptions, hoping to find patterns or explanations. Despite their efforts, the haunting seemed increasingly intelligent, responding to their actions, anticipating their movements, and escalating in intensity whenever the family attempted to confront it. It was in the dead of winter, January 1985, that Janet experienced what she would later describe as a defining moment of terror. Alone in the basement, folding laundry on a cold Thursday afternoon, she heard a whisper call her name from the shadows. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but the voice returned, soft yet chilling, like a silk sheet dragged across concrete. She froze. The shadows seemed to thicken, moving unnaturally, as if the darkness itself had come alive. Before she could react, a cold wind rushed past her, extinguishing the single bare light bulb overhead, plunging her into darkness. Panic surged, and she ran for the stairs, only to feel something brush against her shoulder, a presence that was undeniably corporeal yet invisible. She bolted up to the main floor, her heart pounding, vowing silently that she would never face the basement alone again. By mid-1985, the Smurl's torment reached its most terrifying climax. Exhausted and desperate, they turned to paranormal experts Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned demonologists who had investigated some of the most notorious hauntings in America. On July 3, 1985, the Warrens arrived at the Chase Street residence, armed with knowledge, experience, and an unwavering resolve. They immediately sensed a powerful demonic presence that had latched onto the house, feeding on fear and amplifying the family's anguish. The Warrens performed extensive investigations, conducting seances, using holy water, and invoking prayers. Throughout the home, each room seemed to resist their efforts. The shadows deepened, objects flew violently, and chilling whispers filled the air, often mocking the Warrens themselves. Yet through a combination of ritual and relentless determination, they managed to weaken the entity, exposing its malevolent nature. Janet later recounted nights when the demon would scream, throw furniture, and even attempt to strangle her in her sleep, only to vanish when confronted with sacred objects. By September 1985, after weeks of spiritual intervention, the Smurls began to regain a semblance of normal life. Though the hauntings never completely ceased, the intensity reduced significantly, allowing them to sleep, laugh, and live without the constant terror that had defined the previous years. The story of the Smurl haunting became a cautionary tale about unseen forces, the fragility of human courage, and the undeniable power of faith and persistence. Even today, the house stands as a chilling reminder of those dark years, whispering tales of terror to those